Today we're working in Cinema 4D and we will be playing around with a plugin called Forester, creating a cool forest, and then we're going to render it out in Redshift. Hey guys, I'm Aaron Sorensen and welcome to VFX Central, where we talk about all things VFX. We do VFX tutorials and even create VFX assets for you guys to use in your videos. And if you want some, click on the link that says free VFX and you can sign up on our email list, get free VFX discounts and other cool updates and stuff. Also look forward to our training coming out called the VFX Crash Course. That's coming out soon. Don't forget to hit the bell here on YouTube so you're notified, and subscribe so that when you can know when these videos are coming out. So we did a poll here on YouTube to see what video to do next, and you guys decided we're gonna do Cinema 4D, Forester plugin, and Redshift. So let's jump into that. Okay, so here we are in Cinema 4D, and here is what we're going to be creating with the plugin Forester and using Redshift. And I'm just gonna tell you guys in advance that I tried several different techniques to get this to work properly, and come to find out it's a lot easier and you don't need to take as many steps as I had done in the past. And what I was doing was I was trying to basically export some of these trees out as proxies and bring them in and clone them and scatter them. I even used the Octane scatter and I used cloner, and it wasn't working right, when the simplest answer was just to do it all using the Forester plugin. So this is what we're going to be creating, and let's jump into Forester. So let's start off from scratch. I'm just gonna copy some of these, the ground and the sky stuff. So we have that. Let's create a new project and we'll just paste this in here. So this ground is pretty simple. It's just a ground with a tiled texture on it. It has some displacement and just nothing too fancy. The plane, I did some displacement effects, and if you guys ever want to mess with that, it's a really great way to make your ground look like it has a lot more resolution and a lot more is going on. So there's different types of noises you can add to your ground, you know, just gives it more detail. And then after that, we just kind of pushed and pulled a bunch of polygons. So nothing too fancy, but that's our ground. And now let's start playing with the Forest plugin. So go to Forester, and we have a rock, a tree, a multicloner, and a little plant. And these each have some different assets within them. So we're just going to start with the tree. And this is the base of what it just comes with. And the first thing you can do is go to their tree library. So let's just navigate. This is one that I was using, and I thought it looked pretty good. So initially it doesn't have any leaves on it, and that's because we are looking at this in the lower resolution. We can see the render levels up to 3, so this is what it will look like when you render it. It'll have all these nice leaves on it, and it'll look pretty good. The other thing we can do is change this size, so I'm just gonna bring this down a little bit to fit into the scale of this plane, so we don't have to scale up the plane too much. And we can just scale it down to wherever we feel looks nice. You also have some really cool parameters, like the trunk parameters. So let me just go back to 2 for now. But they have this cool curve, and this allows you to mess with the trunk of the tree and kind of give a little bit more variety in there if you want. So that's really cool. Subdivisions, there's a lot of cool things in here you can mess with, and you can attach things. So there's just, I suggest you kind of go through here and check it out, the hyper wind effects. And if you turn that on, you'll see these little branches are nicely animated. They'll be blowing in the wind. Now if I turn the resolution up, it's gonna slow it down a little bit, but it can still totally work. And the other cool thing is, once we'll just turn this up to see if this will work. Go to 3, simulation, and you can cache the sim. And when it's done, so it's caching the wind, it'll be done like that. And if I hit play, it will play, but it's going to play really, really slow. But it works. So I suggest playing with it in a lower resolution before bumping it up. So there's a lot of other controls. Some of these things I honestly haven't even messed with. And so I suggest you kind of come in here and see what else it can do. It looks like we can make this thing a little more wavy. That's kind of cool. So you have a lot of control of being able to design your style of tree you want, which is awesome. Let's now get into, I mean, obviously they have fruit. They have so many things in here that you guys can play with. It's pretty cool. But let's just get into the actual lighting and rendering side of things when using this with Redshift. So first thing is I'm going to turn the leaves back on, and I found this handy little tool. This does render like this. If we hit render, it'll totally work. However, we can make this look even better if we convert these materials to Redshift materials, of course. So I'll just show you what this is looking like. There won't be any grass. It'll kind of look dead, but there you got it. So it is working. And we need to just spice this thing up a little bit. So let's do that. So if you click on the trunk and the leaf material and you go to your Redshift conversion and you do convert, replace selected materials and let go, what it just did is it took all of the materials we had on the tree and it actually turned them into Redshift materials. So that's very helpful because now we can use a lot of the cool, things we have in Redshift. So, for example, I know that the trunk of the tree, if we wanted to add a little bit more, displacement or something like that, we could go in there and do that, just giving it a little bit more detail. So let's zoom in here and take a look. So we can see these branches don't have a ton of good detail on them, but we could add a bump map. And let's actually turn on some the reflections. So you can see when I turn that on, you can start seeing these reflections on the branches. And maybe we can try an angle where the sun's hitting it a little bit more so we can see the sheen. So you can see some of that down there. And it's looking kind of metallic. So we can break this up by adding a bump map. And we just plug this into overall bump. And then we're going to do a color correct. And we'll grab that from right here. We'll go in and out into the bump. And immediately you can see it started breaking up that texture, those reflections. And I'll turn my roughness up. So now you can see we have these branches have just a little bit of sheen on it, and I'm going to turn that down. That's just to help us get a little bit more detail. We probably won't be that close. If you are, you're probably going to end up sculpting a particular asset for that. So let's back up a little bit more and let's play with some of these leaves. Because the leaves, I think, need a little bit more reflections in them. So we're just going to turn that up and turn up some of our roughness on there. So now we're getting some nice reflections on those leaves. And another cool technique is this backlighting translucency. So if you don't want to do like subsurface scattering, if you turn this on, watch what it'll do. It'll start adding this really cool, what it looks like subsurface scattering. It'll do some cool things. So here we go. We're gonna turn this on. See how it kind of just filled in? It makes it look like it does have some translucency, but you're not calculating all of that subsurface scattering. So this kind of fills out your tree a little bit more, and I feel like it makes it come alive. So that's really helpful. And now we have this nice looking tree. Maybe the leaves are a little too reflective, so we can just turn those down a little bit and maybe turn up the roughness. And let's start scattering this thing. So I'm going to pause. And here's the cool thing about Forester. This is what I loved, is you don't need to create proxies. It does very well at handling its own assets and distributing them. So use the multi-cloner and drag that tree into that multi-cloner. And now it's going to ask for a geometry. So we're just going to grab that plane and just wait a sec, and it should start populating these trees on our scene, 100 of them. So we can see right there that it will do that. But we first need to check off display points. Okay, and we can see that we have that in there. I did notice when I had my displacement on there, it doesn't seem to like what we had on there. So that may be one downfall. And if you did create maybe a noise pattern in here that you wanted to use, that you were really excited about on these hills, let's just say it was something like that, don't worry, because you can just click on this and go to make it a current state, and we'll delete that old one, and now we have this guy. So this plane now has that detail that you used, and if we put this in now, we're going to have those trees. Now let's back up a little bit and let's render and see what this is starting to look like. All right, so now we can see we have these trees scattered on this ground plane, and they're looking pretty good and pretty photorealistic. So that's looking nice. And we can come in here and we can start messing with some of these fun parameters. Like you have the randomization of the position, you have the randomization of rotation, and of course randomization of scale. So we can just turn this on and it's going to change the scale. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with that, and I suggest you kind of play with it and see what kind of stuff you can create. It also will rotate it. So lots of really cool things that you can do. You can mess with the distribute on curve, growth, and filtering. So this would actually filter based on our camera's perspective. So you'd need to put a camera in here. And I believe if we go to another view, that it will clip whatever the camera, whatever's not in our camera's view. It should be doing that. There we go. We got some far clipping, back facing. So yeah, kind of a cool thing. You may have to update it every time, but oh, there we go. Auto clipping. There we go. So now if I turn this, we can see it will clip, and this is just going to help save some rendering time. So that's really handy. And oh man, wish we kept that view open. There we go. Let's just pan this thing up a little bit more. Okay. So now let's start populating the scene with a couple more assets. And if we go to plugins, Forester, let's do some bushes. So I'm going to hide this for now. And we can see we have this little bush, but let's change it so we can do the same thing. They have these great assets right there. And again, it's just as easy as going to plugins and the multi-cloner, piping that in, just putting it on the geometry, turning off points so we can actually see it, And this time we're going to get a little bit crazier. We're going to go for like 5,000 little bushes. And those are looking pretty cool. And let's turn our trees back on. And let's check out the render. Okay, so it's starting to work and we can see that it's looking okay, but I definitely think we can do the same thing we did with the trees and increase and change this texture, because I'm not digging that texture. So I'm going to pause this. I'm going to take a look at what we have here on the leaf. Okay, so none of these, I believe, are being used on this grass, so I'm going to delete it. And then we're going to click on this little grass, go to the Redshift material, conversion, we're going to replace it. And we're going to go in here. Let's boot up the render. And I know a couple of things that I already want to add, and one of which is a color correction. So while that's starting to boot up, I'm just going to start dragging in some nodes and moving things around. So we're just going to do input here, color correct. And I'm going to turn down the saturation and turn down the gamma. That may be a little too dark. There we go. Just had to bring some of that saturation down. The other thing I'm looking at is I want to bring in some of those reflections like we have on the tree. So we can do that just like we did before. Turn up the reflections, turn up the roughness. Maybe we'll start getting some nice, like, this is almost like wet grass. Some of us how it's a little too strong. We'll try to just make it a little bit more subtle. It's looking better. And we're going to do the same thing and make this backlighting translucency on. And this will give the illusion of some type of subsurface scattering. But you're not going to have to do all the crazy scattering like we'd normally do. So that's already looking a lot better. It's blending nicely with these trees. And I'm digging the look of these trees. And the cool thing, these are all we can animate all of this. This all can just, we can use the hyperwind and it'll be fully animated. So that's really cool. So let's try the rocks now. So let me just pause this. Same thing we've been doing. Matter of fact, we could, we'll just do it this way. We could just go up here and go forest, rock. I am going to duplicate this really quickly. It's going to make more of those, but we're going to throw the rock in here and we're going to turn down. We don't need that many rocks in our scene. So we're going to try to turn it down. This rock may be really big too. So, and we are inside of it. So let's turn the rock scale down. Wow. Okay. So that's too many rocks. That looks weird, seeing that many rocks in a place, unless you're like way up in the mountains, but that just is looking strange. So we need to turn that down. Let's just do like 450. The other thing I think I should do is do that same camera linking, and we'll do the auto clipping on this as well. And let's make sure that this is, there we go. That looks better, just 150. That looks much better. And I definitely want to have some variation on the size. So I'm going to just play with that right there. Okay. All right, so we have these rocks, and we can apply a material. So now we have that material on them, and we can do the same thing that we've done before. So Redshift, conversion, replace, So now it's going to replace that with the Redshift material. And what we can do in this one is do a bump map. Plug this in to the bump. And we're going to do a color correct. And I do the color correct so I can control the bump a little bit more. And we're just going to plug this in. I'm going to turn up the intensity of it. I'm also going to give it a little bit of reflection. Okay. Let's hit render and see how this is looking now with these rocks populating our scene. Okay. This is not bad. It's just adding a little bit more to our scene. It's looking cool. The last thing I wanted to demonstrate is the new post effects, and these are amazing. I really dig these new post effects and what you can do. So one of the cool things is changing, I mean, this is something you could do before, but I'm going to change it to Ace's color space. And this is just a pretty common color space that they use in the industry to color. And then you can change it to, let's do Rec 709 Aces. Nice. And you can also add a LUT. So if we had a specific LUT, we could do that. We'll just do that one. And you can dial back your LUT, you know, so you don't have to have it full blast if you wanted to just get a style. So you can dial this in wherever you like. There's also color correction tools for exposure and for contrast. Photographic exposure, so this is like turning up your brightness. And of course, there's always the favorites, which is, you know, you've been waiting to see, but the bloom effects, which are also fantastic, and the flare effects, and the streak effects. There's so many cool effects in here that you can play with. So you kind of want to dial it to where it's looking the way you want. And you can dial these in at any time because they are post effects. So I'm just going to do a nice render. And we're going to take a look at this. But yeah, the blooming effects, and I'll do a whole nother lesson talking about all the new effects that come with the new Redshift coming out. And the flare effects are amazing, amazing. So I've been having a lot of fun with those. But we did this, you know, relatively quick, and you guys could do a lot more with this. You could have some mountains back here with trees scattered on them in the distance, and then just populating your scene with all of these objects. And it renders it. I mean, this is a lot of polygons on this tree, and it's rendering it pretty fast. And like I said, all of this can be animated. So these trees can be blowing in the wind, and all the leaves, all these little grass areas right here, they all can be moving dynamically. And then once you have this render, you can just start playing with your bloom effects. So if you want more bloom, you can do that. I'm going to crank up the flare so you guys can start seeing these cool flare effects: chromatic aberration, flare size, the halo, intensity. So there's a lot of fun stuff in here for you guys to explore. But that is Forester for Cinema 4D and Redshift. Let me know if you guys have any questions. If you want to see more in-depth things with Forester, maybe a specific parameter like animation. We can go into that, but hopefully this helps you guys kind of see the power of using Forester and Redshift. And it's pretty cool that you don't even need to do proxies. You can do it all with the multi-cloner, and it's very responsive and super fast. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you guys so much for watching my tutorials and supporting me. This has been awesome. I'm loving this. I actually got back from Vancouver last week at SIGGRAPH, and I loved it. It was one of the most inspirational things I've been to. If you're an artist or an aspiring artist, you got to go to SIGGRAPH. It's just a geek fest of all these artists talking about render engines and 3D applications and styles and techniques they use, and it was so much fun. It's also really good for networking. I loved it. I made some really good friends, and so I highly suggest you guys go to SIGGRAPH. It's just really good to be a part of whatever community in VFX you're in. So that was awesome, and don't forget to sign up on our email list. That's where I do a lot of updates and things like that. Follow me on my social if you want to see some of my work on Instagram and all that fun stuff, Twitter. Yeah, so this is kind of going to be the new format. We're going to try to see what you guys want to see in these tutorials. We'll do some polls, and we'll just keep these things coming out. So thanks again, guys, and we will see you in the next video. See ya.